Right now, shock, the war is almost over and the White House is playing a dangerous game. Trump is putting pressure on Ukraine, but a Ukrainian response has already been found. The Geneva negotiations are either trapping Zelenskyy or, on the contrary, giving him a chance to deliver a decisive blow to the aggressor. Against this backdrop, Ukraine is receiving missiles that are causing panic in the Kremlin. Germany is going all in. A sensational decision by Chancellor Merz. And yet another shock for the Kremlin. The Spanish aid package is undermining the aggressor's plans. The West has blown up the front. New deliveries are completely changing the balance of power. The front is boiling. The Ukrainian flag is flying in the center of Pokrovsk. 3 enemy platoons were destroyed by a single precise strike from the AFU. The offensives in the south and in Pokrovsk have failed. Ukrainian defenders are accomplishing the impossible. They are operating both on the front line and behind enemy lines. A blackout in occupied Donetsk has paralyzed the aggressor's troops. The intensity of the war is off the charts. While politicians are shaking hands, the armies of Europe are taking up positions. The West is preparing an unexpected strike. French and British troops are preparing to enter Ukraine. The Kremlin is getting nervous. Thunder from Madrid. Ukraine is receiving military aid that shatters Russia's plans. Spain strikes the aggressor. The new aid package hits all of Russia's weak spots. Madrid is pouring billions into Ukraine's defense. Moscow is in shock. Russia is on the verge of collapse, military funds are dwindling, there are almost no new contract soldiers, and the front is grinding down the occupiers in the meat grinder of war. Russia is on the brink of disaster. All this and more in our program Hotspot. A bolt from the blue. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz announced that Ukraine is receiving long-range missiles, weapons capable of breaking through enemy defenses where they least expect it. But the technological storm is only just beginning. The famous anti-aircraft systems have already arrived in Ukraine. Now all the enemy's deadly iron will be sent to the scrap heap. Then Spain, it's simply a shock. Madrid has rolled out unprecedented military aid, strengthening the Ukrainian army to such an extent that the Kremlin is already in a panic. Don't miss the explosive details right now.
Even more aid and support, the German Chancellor has promised to equip the Ukrainian army with long-range weapon systems. But Merz did not disclose details about the number of missiles or the delivery timelines.
For months, we have been working intensively with the Ukrainian government on implementing long-range fire projects, as we call them technically. The Ukrainian army will be equipped with such weapon systems.
At the same time, the Chancellor refused to answer a question about Germany's previous reluctance to supply Ukraine with Taurus long-range cruise missiles. He called this approach a tactic to increase pressure on the aggressor country, Russia.
The operation of the Taurus missiles directly depends on the level of training of the technical personnel. That is apparently the main point here, is that only Bundeswehr servicemen who are members of the German armed forces are currently able to use the Taurus missiles. Additionally, it would require quite a significant amount of time to properly train Ukrainian specialists so that they could safely and effectively operate these advanced missile systems on their own.
Germany is the largest European donor of military aid to Ukraine. Since the beginning of the war, the government has provided Ukraine with assistance totaling more than 50 billion euros. In September, Berlin launched a new initiative to procure long-range drones jointly with Ukraine's defense industry. Germany will also allocate an additional 150 million euros to purchase weapons from the US for Kyiv.
Germany is well aware of the possibilities of direct military confrontation with the Russian Federation. That is why it is deeply invested in ensuring the defense capability of the Ukrainian state and accordingly in the technical rearmament of Ukraine's defense forces.
Meanwhile, the Ukrainian Air Force has strengthened its air defense with the new British Terrahawk Paladin weapon system. The number of units delivered has not been disclosed, but even a small batch of such systems will significantly bolster Ukraine's air defense.
For the Ukrainian side, this means creating a so-called focal air defense system to protect key logistical and military facilities from being hit by the enemy's aerodynamic weapons. First and foremost, this refers to UAVs. This system is highly mobile and, accordingly, can be easily redeployed to any location. Given its autonomous operation, this significantly increases Ukraine's ability to counter threats, particularly from the Russian Federation.
Spain will also allocate 615 million euros to support Ukraine, the lion's share of which is earmarked specifically for military needs. In the
In the first place, this is a program for additional arms purchases for the needs of the Ukrainian armed forces from the United States. The second is accordingly the strengthening of Ukraine's air defense systems. And accordingly, this also includes logistical and technical support, including the transfer by Spain of heavy armored vehicles and weaponry that are currently in service with the Spanish army.
Since the start of the full-scale war, Ukraine has ramped up weapons production and the implementation of new technologies which are already being used on the front lines. The volume of domestic weapons production has increased tenfold.
Ukraine has scaled up production of the Bogdana self-propelled artillery systems to 20 units per month. These are record numbers even for NATO countries. A distinctive feature is that it uses a modified 155mm caliber, which is the NATO standard, plus accordingly the price-to-quality ratio. In addition, Ukraine's defense forces have increased artillery shell production, and the increase has been record-breaking. There is also talk of scaling up the production of both FPV drones and accordingly strike drones with a target range of over 1,500 kilometers.
Earlier, Volodymyr Zelenskyy stated that domestic weapons production, particularly of ballistic systems and drones, is one of the key tasks for the government and manufacturers.
It is worth noting the scaling up of production of electronic warfare systems and radars. In this segment as well, Ukrainian defense holds one of the leading positions in the world, and accordingly the production of maritime drones.
All of this means that Ukrainian developers have demonstrated the ability to create high-precision weaponry capable of destroying important enemy military targets deep behind the front lines.
Sensational! The end of the war. Trump's special representative for Ukraine, Keith Kellogg, shocked everyone. The world press is full of headlines. It's a trap. The Geneva negotiations are in the spotlight. The world's great powers are seeking a compromise that could become the final touch for long-awaited peace or disaster. Find out more right now.
The Geneva talks on Trump's peace plan are of crucial importance. Representatives from the US, Ukraine, and national security advisors from France, the UK, and Germany participated in discussions on the American proposal to end the war in Ukraine.
Ukraine is approaching this process with a clear understanding of its interests. This is another stage in the ongoing dialogue of recent days, primarily aimed at coordinating a shared vision for the next steps.
Trump's aides, US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, attended the meeting.
The meeting was the most productive and substantive of all those held so far. In
the Ukrainian president's office, they are ready to work as quickly as possible to achieve real peace.
Ukraine never wanted this war and will do everything to end it with an honorable peace. Ukraine will never be an obstacle to peace, and representatives of the Ukrainian state will defend the just interests of the Ukrainian people and the foundations of European security. We are grateful for the willingness of our European partners to help.
Ukraine's allies are seeking to rewrite Trump's proposal, which they believe would benefit Russia. They disagree with at least 4 points.
We firmly adhere to the principle that borders should not be changed by force. We are also concerned about the proposed restrictions on Ukraine's armed forces, which would make Ukraine vulnerable to future attacks. This is tantamount to military castration and leaves Ukraine perpetually vulnerable to a third invasion.
European leaders agreed to use the draft as a basis and expressed their willingness to work on it together.
We have very good progress, and we are moving toward a just and lasting peace. Ukrainians deserve peace more than anyone else on this planet. We believe that our great friend, the United States, especially President Trump and his team, will confirm this peace.
Keith Kellogg is confident that Trump will be able to end this war.
The foundation of the agreement has already been established. We are almost on the home stretch to ending the war. There are things in the plan that should be spelled out and explained more clearly. There will also be security guarantees, with the United States as the main guarantor in order to avoid the mistakes of the Budapest Memorandum and the Minsk agreements.
Right now, the media are reporting that Trump has appointed Driscoll, a friend and former classmate of Vice President J.D. Vance, as his new special representative. It is quite possible that he will work in parallel with Keith Kellogg, who may leave the administration in January. Washington continues to insist on advancing its 28-point plan. According to the plan, Ukraine must make territorial concessions to Russia and reduce its army. The US and Europe pledged to finance the reconstruction of Ukraine. Sanctions on the Russian Federation are being lifted gradually, and Moscow and Washington are signing an agreement on long-term economic cooperation.
This is not our recommendation, this is not our peace plan. This is a proposal that was received, and as mediators we agreed to share it. And we did not make it public. It leaked. It was not made public by our members or our representatives.
Donald Trump believes that Ukraine may decide to sign the peace plan on November 27th before Thanksgiving. But when meeting with journalists, he clarified that his peace plan is far from a final proposal.
No, it is far from final. We would like to achieve peace. This should have happened a long time ago. The war between Ukraine and Russia should never have happened. If I had been president, this would never have happened. We are trying to end it. One way or another, we have to end it. On
Friday, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy addressed the people of Ukraine, stating in a heartfelt message that Ukraine now faces a very difficult and challenging choice and risks either losing its national dignity or its most important and key international partner.
This is one of the most difficult moments in our history. Right now, the pressure on Ukraine is among the heaviest it has ever been. Right now, Ukraine may be facing a very difficult choice. Either the loss of dignity or the risk of losing a key partner.
Sources close to the Kremlin say that the provisions of this document should be seen more as a basis for a future agreement, rather than as an agreement that Putin will officially sign.
If Kyiv does not want to discuss President Trump's proposal and ultimately refuses to accept it, then both they and the European warmongers must fully understand that the events that took place in Kupiansk will inevitably be repeated, and on other key sections of the front as well. Maybe not as quickly as we would like, but inevitably it will keep happening. And overall, that suits us. Moscow objects to the proposed security guarantees for Ukraine, the size of its army, and the use of frozen Russian assets to support Ukraine. We have this text.
We have this text. We received it through the existing channels of communication with the American administration. I believe that it could also serve as a basis for a final peaceful settlement.
The Kremlin is creating informational conditions to reject the agreement, since Russia is not interested in making territorial concessions, according to the American Institute for the Study of War.
A Russian victory is not inevitable. Ukraine and the West can exploit several key Russian weaknesses to force the Kremlin to negotiate and make real concessions.
Meanwhile, the Kremlin is facing growing problems with material and human resources, which will continue to complicate Moscow's ability to sustain the war as it drags on. Therefore, the Russian Federation is very interested in forcing Ukraine to surrender critically important territories that the Russian military is unlikely to be able to capture. That is why Gerasimov, when reporting the situation at the front to Putin, continues to exaggerate successes, and Putin plays along in order to force Ukraine and the West to accept Russia's demands in negotiations.
The front is ablaze, the occupiers are boiling in the cauldron of war. 3 enemy platoons have been destroyed in a day. In Pokrovsk, the Russians have broken through again, but the city still stands. The Ukrainian armed forces have once again surprised everyone and accomplished the incredible. The enemy's offensive in southern Ukraine has faded into oblivion, while on the Kupiansk direction, Ukraine's defenders have surged forward. The defense forces are managing to strike not only along the front line, but also behind enemy lines. Another Mi-8 helicopter down, and the occupied territories have also taken a hit. Part of the Donetsk region has been plunged into darkness. This has paralyzed the occupiers' troops. More on what is happening at the front and around it at this very moment coming up next.
In the past day, 3 platoons have been eliminated and more than a platoon wounded. The General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces has shared details about the fighting for Pokrovsk. Thus, the defense forces destroyed exactly 60 Russian assault troops who, under the cover of fog, tried to advance toward the city center and gain a foothold. Another 23 people were wounded. As a result, the occupiers' attempt to break through failed. At the same time, the enemy still holds the old positions they captured a few days earlier. According to the Ukrainian Armed Forces Command, search and assault operations are currently underway, and the entire city essentially remains a gray zone.
The enemy, who entered through the southern outskirts of Pokrovsk, has already carried out the establishment of a certain bridgehead there. The bridgehead is already being supplied logistically. Accordingly, the gray zone is very large, probably most of the city today, although the lines on the northern edge of the city in the northern part of Pokrovsk are still being held today, particularly by our paratroopers.
Another direction that regularly appears in military reports is the Kupiansk area. Despite Gerasimov's report about the encirclement of around 5,000 Ukrainian soldiers there, our command denies this information, instead reporting successes and advances by the defense forces.
Today it has not yet been possible to push the enemy out of Kupiansk itself, but the counter-attacking actions that the defense forces are demonstrating now are gradual advances. These are not any sudden counter-offensive operations, but rather counter-attacking actions. Nevertheless, they are leading to our defense forces being able to regain some tactical positions that had been lost there several months ago, right in the city of Kupiansk itself.
The Russians have also become more active in the south of our country. The Zaporizhzhia direction, from where the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine was drawing reserves to Pokrovsk, had been bringing rather alarming news for several weeks. However, the situation has now been stabilized.
The active offensive that, as they declared a week ago, was taking place is no longer happening. Now we are conducting strikes and firepower against the reserves. What is especially important is that now they have started destroying the railway that supplies these groups.
Analysts say the situation in Zaporizhzhia remains difficult. The enemy continues to concentrate forces and, with sabotage groups, is infiltrating villages under Ukrainian control near the Kakhovka reservoir. However, these attacks fail time and again.
The Russians once again failed to take Stepnohirsk or even the multi-story buildings in the southern part of the settlement. Only part of the houses are under enemy control. Additional pressure on Stepnohirsk is created by the enemy's attempts to break through along the road to Hrihorivka. To the north of the seaside dashas, there is a large open area, so the Russians don't even try to gain a foothold there. Instead, taking great risks, they dash a bit further north, where there is a building and at least some kind of trench line.
But when advancing in open fields, the enemy suffers colossal losses thanks to our artillery, which is why the occupiers are no longer given vehicles and are sent into the assault exclusively on foot. At the same time, our defense forces managed to strike not only along the front line, but also deep in the Russian rear. In particular, the past day was marked by an unprecedented event. Special Operations Forces shot down a Russian Mi-8 military helicopter with a long-range drone right on Russian territory. As noted by the agency, this opens a new chapter in the war, giving the Ukrainian armed forces unprecedented capabilities.
The point is that previously Ukrainians shot down helicopters in the air using regular FPV drones with a maximum range of several dozen kilometers and warheads weighing 1.5 kilograms. In this case, we see that it wasn't necessary to ram the drone into the helicopter, thanks to the powerful warhead. But on the other hand, as you can see, this is happening at a different altitude, where regular FPV drones probably wouldn't reach. And very importantly, according to some sources, though this still needs to be verified, this is happening at a very long distance. So in this case, it's the Rostov region, the Kutenikovo area. And what is Kutenikovo? Well, basically, it's 200 kilometers from the line of contact.
The occupied territories were also affected. Part of the Donetsk region was plunged into a total blackout, which partially paralyzed the command of Russian forces. Among more than a dozen successful strikes, the explosions in Dokuchevsk are worth noting. Analysts are still debating. Was the nighttime glow the result of a hit on a power station or an ammunition depot?
Whatever it was, either one is ultimately a blow to logistics, because if a substation is destroyed, the group loses electricity. If the strike hits ammunition supplies, the group loses shells. This is important for the group that is currently advancing in Donetsk region. In other words, at the very least, it slows down their offensive potential.
At the same time, fighters on the ground confirm this information. In particular, due to intensified strikes on Russian logistics in the Donetsk region, assault units have lost their steady supply of reserves and weapons and have lost momentum in their advance in Pokrovsk as well.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Tensions are rising, the West is preparing for war. While all interested parties are signing Trump's peace plan, the West is making a bold move. France and the United Kingdom are preparing to deploy their troops to Ukraine. It seems the geopolitical thriller is just beginning. All the details are coming up in the report.
The United Kingdom and France are preparing their troops for a possible deployment to Ukraine. And all this is happening precisely at the moment when the US is pushing its own peace plan. A document consisting of 28 points where one of the key elements directly demands there must be no NATO troops on the territory of Ukraine.
We, Europeans, have always supported a strong and just peace and welcome any efforts to achieve it. Of course, for any plan to work, Ukrainians and Europeans are needed. So this is absolutely clear. We must also understand that in this war there is one aggressor and one victim. Therefore, we have not heard about any concessions from Russia. I mean, if Russia really wanted peace, it could have agreed to an unconditional ceasefire some time ago. At this time, we are once again seeing the bombing of civilians.
The United Kingdom, as Bloomberg reports, has already identified specific military units that could be rapidly deployed to Ukraine. Defense Minister John Gilly stated that London has updated its plans to send troops to Ukraine as part of a coalition of the willing. This coalition involves about 30 countries led by the United Kingdom and France.
We have conducted reconnaissance in Ukraine, so we know which units will be used, how to deploy them, and what tasks they can perform. The plans will be coordinated with other coalition members depending on Ukraine's needs and the terms of any peace agreement.
In fact, London is forming the framework for a future presence, the very one that is supposed to take effect immediately after a possible peace agreement. Britain is already allocating more than £100 million for these purposes, which is about $130 million. This money is for the initial expenses of sending troops.
There are ongoing contacts between Ukraine and its partners regarding needs and the situation. This is one of the channels through which, meaning at the level of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, at the level of various agencies and different coordination groups established between Ukraine and its partners, this information is conveyed, Ukrainian assessments. On the other hand, the partners have direct contacts with civil society organizations in Ukraine, through donor organizations and through a whole range of contacts at the embassy. Accordingly, they receive assessments from localities, regions, oblasts, from mayors, from local governments and from local activists. They also receive information about the situation that is unfolding and about the needs. The third point is that intelligence services and analytical centers are also at work. Therefore, it can be stated with complete certainty and responsibility that the partners have an excellent understanding of the situation and the needs that exist.
The plans include stationing contingents further from the front line and continuing the training of Ukrainian units both in Britain and directly in Ukraine. After the signing of the peace agreement, a coordination center is to be established in Kyiv under the leadership of a British two-star officer. Its tasks include logistics, armament, training, the restoration of Ukrainian ground forces, as well as ensuring air security, which is necessary for the resumption of international air travel. A separate component is the expansion of the Black Sea Naval Group consisting of Turkey, Romania, and Bulgaria. Demining, the security of trade routes, and the restoration of maritime exports, according to London's plan, these elements should become key for the post-war period.
If the contingent is deployed, British units will be stationed far from the conflict zone. Obviously, this refers to Western Ukraine, where even now, by the way, according to my information, we know that American military personnel are present there. There are quite a large number of instructors who are training personnel, including in logistics and other areas. Accordingly, this also concerns the instructors. So hoping that foreign troops will be stationed on the line of contact in the event of a peace process is absolutely unrealistic for now. In other words, what is currently happening at this moment will simply continue as it has been. It is only quite possible to have discussions about the idea of replacing, for example, American instructors and military personnel with British military personnel instead.
Right now, Ukraine and its European partners are facing a difficult choice. On the one hand, there is the need to provide reliable security guarantees and maintain stability after a possible agreement. On the other hand, there is the risk of going beyond the American plan, thereby provoking a new round of pressure from Russia, or even undermining the very architecture of the future peace agreement.
A sensational European breakthrough. Spain is making headlines. Madrid is pouring hundreds of millions into Ukraine's defense. Moscow is in shock. A financial blow to the aggressor. Europe is going all in. Spain is arming Ukraine to the teeth. You have to see this. Don't change the channel.
Spain plans to allocate a new aid package to Ukraine worth 817 million euros. It is expected to be approved within a month, Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez announced.
We are an ally and a friend of Ukraine. And it is a great honor for us to welcome Zelenskyy at the Moncloa Palace and in a broad sense to express our love for the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian government.
When Ukraine was in dire need of anti-aircraft missile systems in 2023, there was a lot of bargaining going on. They were figuring out who would provide what. The Spanish were the first to give us Hawk air defense systems that had been in storage. And the Hawk systems, including the Spanish ones, demonstrated very high effectiveness.
This aid includes 300 million euros as part of the security agreement, 100 million euros under the Pearl instrument, for the purchase by NATO countries of weapons for Ukraine from the US, and 215 million euros under the EU SAFE instrument, for the purchase of equipment to counter drones as well as radars and other hardware.
The United States is no longer helping Ukraine. The United States is willing to sell weapons to European countries even if they end up transferring them to Ukraine. In
the framework of this cooperation, Spain will purchase 40 missiles for the IRESTI air defense systems, which are in short supply for Ukraine during the winter period.
Spain has traditionally, throughout its history, been a reliable and skilled producer of weapons, small arms, and armored vehicles. It's a mistake to write them off. In the context of the fact that the quantity and to some extent the quality of weapons produced by the Spanish has decreased over the past decades, but this is a general European trend.
It has also been announced that our country will engage in comprehensive cooperation with the Spanish in the field of air defense. In Madrid, 5 bilateral documents were signed, including a memorandum of understanding on industrial cooperation in the field of security and defense between Spanish and Ukrainian companies.
The Spanish may not be exactly like that. They're generally not loud, but they do help, especially when you reach out to them.
During his visit, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy thanked Spain for its support of Ukraine in the face of Russian aggression, particularly for the military assistance provided since the beginning of the full-scale invasion.
Shock in the Russian regions. Funds for recruiting fresh contract soldiers for the aggressor country's army are running out catastrophically. The flow of cannon fodder is drying up sharply, and this is already having an impact on the front lines. How is the reduction in the number of new recruits changing the situation on the front lines? Details coming up.
Putin's so-called special military operation is winding down. Russian regions have started to run out of money for contract soldiers. Officials from several Russian regions report that payments of 1.1 million rubles are being cancelled, allegedly due to a difficult budget situation. The first to stop luring potential contract soldiers with big money in 2025 was the Zabaikalsky Krai. Next, Khakassia also announced that there was no money but told people to hang in there. Now it's Yakutia's turn.
Yakutia has run out of money for payments to the military. The budget can't cope, said the Republic's finance minister, Ivan Alexiev.
The problem with delayed payments beyond Baikal is so massive that, after opposition channels in Russia, even Kremlin media were forced to pick up the story. The widespread public outcry forced even Russian officials to acknowledge the problem.
The men are extremely outraged that after signing a contract and going off to defend their homeland, they have to wait months for regional payments, the so-called lifting allowances. I won't repeat everything they've written to me because there are hardly any words fit for broadcast. And I understand their emotions. I'll just quote the last sentence. It's suitable for broadcast and it captures the essence of the issue. Please tell them over there that the officials' response, the budget is complicated, we have no money, just be patient, does not satisfy us.
It's especially hard to be patient in such a situation for the occupiers who are already dead. Because of the refusal to pay the promised compensation to their families, the latter can't even be buried properly. When
a cargo 200 arrives, the family members receive 100,000 from the region, plus 1,100,000. That amount was enough to arrange a proper funeral for their father, brother, or husband. Today, the most they get is supposedly 100,000, and that's only if they show up on time. They have nothing to bury them with.
And economists are already warning that things will only get worse from here. The Russian treasury is empty. Because of Western sanctions, the freezing of Kremlin assets and the widespread rejection of Putin's bloody energy resources, Russia has nothing to pay its own soldiers what they're owed.
The Russian economy has entered a downward spiral of contraction, already quite active, noticeable and undeniable. And it's unlikely that it will be able to get out of this spiral easily. It's not even clear if it can get out at all.
Maybe not as quickly as we would like, but it seems that Western and American sanctions have indeed broken the backbone of the Russian economy. In its plans and budgets for 2025, the Kremlin has clearly set its expectations too high.
It is relying on different oil prices, on a different dollar exchange rate, which currently does not exist. As a result,
there is no money to pay each new soldier 2.5 million rubles per contract with the Russian Ministry of Defense. The same goes for payments for injuries and deaths of servicemen. Everyone who went to war to make some money will now only earn themselves a one-way ticket.
Stagnation has been going on since around September 2024. That is, since September 2024. So for almost a year and a half, or actually even more than a year and a half now, Russia's economy has been stagnant. In short, Russia's economy is not growing. So counting from September, that means we're already approaching a year and a half. So the economy isn't growing, and moreover, it's actually declining. And this decline continues and is getting worse. What's more, the financial situation is deteriorating. Companies are no longer making a profit. As a result, profit tax payments are being reduced. Because of this, the regional budget is already in serious trouble.
In an attempt to at least somehow reassure the families of Russian contract soldiers and grieving widows, Kremlin officials verbally promised to resolve the issue as soon as possible.
Supposedly, the Republic's government has already found a solution. The minister promised to resume the payments.
However, all of this is just empty words. After all, there simply isn't enough money to fund Putin's campaign. For now, the gaps are being patched using budgets meant for healthcare, utilities, and education. However, even all of these combined won't cover even a third of the expenses for the special military operation. Meanwhile, Russian ZEI military correspondents are already loudly reporting widespread discontent among Kremlin contract soldiers. None of them are eager to die for an idea rather than for money. And on some sections of the front, ZEI military correspondents admit that after the news about the Kremlin stopping payments, cases of unauthorized leave and desertion have sharply increased.
That's all for now. For more hot news from the front, tune in to the next episode.